All right, I just looked in the hallway and it doesn't look like anybody's coming, and I'm greedy, so I'm going to steal the next 2 minutes, and we can turn them into questions at the end or something else. But why don't we get started? My name is Ben Piccini. I'm faculty in education, and the purpose of my talk today is, as best I can, to stoke some really juicy, interesting conversation. As usual, I have to start with a mile-long list of all of my, provisos and why you shouldn't listen to me, and be thou wise in what thou listenest to. But I think that the topic is a really, really juicy one. This is my take on the trends facing the university, not our university, universities, the structure, the construct of university over the next 50 years. And my take, and I'll kind of give you the spoiler warning up front, is I think BYU-Idaho is poised in a really, really good position for the trends that are going to face other universities right now and for the next 10 years. For the next 50 years, I have no idea what's going to happen. I have some inklings, some clues. It's really dangerous to forecast out 50 years. But I'm going to try today because it gets really fun, probably dangerous. It gets really fun to think about what would the university at 50 years from now look like? And what are the things that we can do to make sure that magic is happening for our students 50 years from now? So that's kind of the goal. Let me do a little bit of an introduction really quick. These are 4 out of the 5 most important people in my life. So this is my wife, Laura. By the way, I have heard that partying and all sorts of craziness is a fun time, but have you ever seen your 11-year-old pass the sacrament? He just did. He actually, that was he's been once to the temple, and there's just magic in seeing your 11-year-old pass the sacrament. So that was really cool. This is my 8-year-old. He was very excited. This is an Oregon Trail choose your own adventure. Yes, he literally got excited and said, Dad, I just died of dysentery. And we were all very excited about that. So that went really well. This is actually my daughter, Izzy, holding a friend of ours, baby. She was just absolutely in heaven. And so these are 4, like I said, 4 of the 5 most important people to me. This is me. So I'm a Baltimore City educator for 6 years. I was a middle school math teacher. I love middle schoolers. I think they're stinky and hilarious. They smell funny, but they are a good time. I was in DC for 4 years. If any of you remember, let's see, Michelle Rhee was kind of a big deal about 10, 15 years ago. She made a lot of change in DC. I was right after her, where a lot of the things that she did was still going on. I was an assistant principal. I love Brandon Sanderson. Miss Foreign was the first book. So the fabulous people in the BYU-Idaho office got me to look like I'm a coin shot, which I thought was pretty cool. So the coins are levitating. I like economics like most people like chocolate. That makes me really unpopular at dinner parties. But I really do. I also am really big on evidence-based practice. So how many of you are visual learners? How many of you are auditory learners? How many of you are kinesthetic learners? It's all fake, friends. It doesn't exist. 50 years of research literature confirms all of it is fake. And by the way, it's probably damaging our kids. So that's the only time you'll hear me rant about that today, but now you know, and we can talk more about that later. I love Italy. I love the food. I love the people. I love the culture. I love the history. And Jonathan Haidt is my homeboy. All right. Here's the 5th. This is my Davy. He's 4 years old, and the other day he fell asleep in my bed, looking like a model. First of all, let's notice the pose, and with his adorable, cute pink cell phone. The real reason I have this slide, though, is so that I can let you know my opinions today are really, really just opinions. Okay. I feel like I'm cheating a little bit because on my nice little jacket here it says education, and you're probably thinking to yourself, "Oh, that's great. He's an education professor. He probably knows all about this stuff." I literally know as much about this as any other person on this campus. I specialize in Axe body spray and people who are getting over breakups. I'm really, really skilled at helping people in those places. Also, fractions. I'm really, really good at teaching middle schoolers how to do fractions. Everything else on here is just that I love to think about this. I love to read. I love to discuss and ponder deeply. So I am not offended if you don't take what I have to say with more than a grain of salt. In fact, I would recommend it. I think that's actually quite wise. Now, there's another layer to this. I love despair.com. If you haven't gone to despair.com, they take these 90s motivational posters and they make them demotivators, and they are hilarious. And I love all of them. They're very, very entertaining. Forecasting is dangerous. And I am trying to play at what does the future hold? And the answer is, I really don't know. There are some things that I think we can catch glimmers of. And so if I'm totally wrong, I'm not staking anything on this. But I think that we have enough glimmers that we can start to teach and think a little bit differently in ways that will help not just the university, but our students and our student experience. Also, this is a picture of me when I was in college. I thought it was very hip at the time. It was I'm Disruptive. It was a Clayton Christensen Institute. You could put this frame around your picture, and I thought it was very clever. I don't know a lot of things, but I have noticed one thing, and that that guy is not that guy. Okay, and I am well aware of that, and I want you to know that. And so nothing that I am saying today is speaking to the way that I think the university should go, or any revelation that I'm receiving. This is just cool opportunities to talk about fun things, and I am very happy leaving it there. Okay, I want to start in a kind of weird way, because I've noticed this habit that we have. This is kind of, I'm teaching an educational psychology class, and I see this a lot psychologically. I have noticed that you can pick out, or I can pick out what somebody might refer to themselves as a Utah Mormon. I can spot them a mile away. That's because they first start with, yes, I'm from Utah. Yes, I'm a Latter-day Saint, but I'm not one of those people. Now, I think there are a lot of causes for this. By the way, I am from Utah, and I love my church, and I love my home state. But I went through a period of this when I was in high school, where I was like, oh, yeah, Utah's so weird. Don't you think? Like, what's with the green jello? And now, a few years removed from that, I proudly tell my friends that green jello flows in my veins, and that I love Utah, and I love all the weird quirks, and the funeral potatoes, and the mountains, and all of the things. But I don't think that this is just a Utah thing. I think there's something in our culture right now. It's a little bit weird, and it's causing us some problems. And I'll give you a few quick examples about this. The first one is negativity bias. There's a great Freakonomics episode on this that found that at the height of the pandemic, the negative media coverage about coronavirus was 8 times more negative to positive. That's pretty bad. But at its best point during the pandemic, it was still 5.5 times more negative to positive. We as humans are wired for negativity. So when we hear one bad thing and 5 good things, you can think of this in your own mind. If you have 5 really positive student reviews and 1 really, really negative student review, what do you think to yourself? That's right. We all are this way. And by the way, the evolutionary psychologists would say, well, that's because you and some friend of yours 10,000 years ago were standing outside a cave, and one of you was like, it's probably fine. And the other one was like, I'm going to run away now. Maybe, maybe not. Here's what I know. We have a wiring towards negativity that causes us a few problems. Okay. Number 2, this is my phrase. Nobody else uses this. This is me. There's a problem with being born in paradise. I think if all of us right now were transported up into the city of Eden, we'd be like, this is awesome. This is so cool. But if you're born in the city of Eden, I wonder if you start to go, man, that gold street is just really shiny. Does it get in your eyes too? It's just kind of annoying, right? The other day, I heard a student complaining, I think seriously, about how BYU-Idaho is just, what were they complaining about? They couldn't stand the tuition. And to be fair, I love this student, and I did not say anything unkind, because the stress is real, right? It really is. But I wanted to transport them for a minute to a large state school and have them understand the difference. And so I think that there really is something that I like to call paradise-born bias, where we don't see it, we don't understand it. The third one is something that actually comes from Gene England. He was a professor at BYU for a long time. He called it anti-parochial parochialism. And it's the one that I talked about before, where in order to make sure it's clear to all of you that I'm not one of those Utah Mormons, I start bagging on Utah Mormons. And I hear this a lot, actually, and including about BYU-Idaho from students. Sometimes they'll say, oh, BYU I do, and they'll roll their eyes. And I say, tell me what you love about BYU-Idaho. They'll say, well, the tuition and the gospel and my faculty are amazing, and I'm getting lots of credits and a great preparation for education. You know, sometimes there's just not a lot to do in Rexburg. I say, okay. So 5 to 1. I think that there's a thing going on here that's worth talking about. The theme of this conference is telling BYU-Idaho's story. And I hope that what you hear and the rest of what I talk about, is that we're getting some things really, really right. That we're allowed to say, like, I'll show you the next slide. Students sent this to me. We're talking about humility and how we have this weird conception of humility. So this is the screenshot they sent me. Here it is a little bit clearer. Some suppose that humility is about beating ourselves. Actually, I should have one of you read it. Can somebody read it nice and loud? Please, go ahead.
Some suppose that humility is about beating ourselves up. Humility does not mean convincing ourselves that we are worthless, meaningless, or of little value, nor does it mean denying or withholding the talents God has given us. We don't discover humility by thinking less of ourselves. We discover humility by thinking less about ourselves. It comes as we go about our work with an attitude of serving God and our fellow men.
I love Elder Uchtdorf here. And by the way, I think that this weird take on humility is affecting our youth in terms of their mental health. I think that they will literally bag on themselves in front of friends, thinking that they are being humble. And by the way, they're typically fishing for a compliment because they need the validation because they keep bagging on themselves. It's a really destructive process. Okay. I pinch myself every day that I get to work here. It is one of the greatest blessings in my life. And that's not just because it's fun for me. It's because I think I'm doing really important work for kids. I'm making a difference. I'm doing something that is meaningful. I feel like I fit in. When people talk about belonging at BYU-Idaho, I go, I don't think there's another place where I could belong in the way that I do, like at BYU-Idaho. And so I hope for the rest of the presentation where we talk about policy and future trends and all of that stuff, the overriding theme is, listen, I think we're getting some things right. Oh, I have to share this example. Sorry, really quick. I have some friends who work at Public Square Magazine, and a couple of years ago, they ran a series of stories called Scary Stories to Tell About Utah. And like, I asked students and they're like, yeah, I heard that, Utahns really struggle with body image and there's a lot of plastic surgery. So I just send them this article. Somebody actually went and researched it. It turns out that is actually true. We have far more than average plastic surgeries in Utah because Park City has a bunch of centers that are world-class to which people fly from other states to get plastic surgery. Another one, Utahns are more depressed. The one down in the bottom is that Utahns partake of pornography more than anybody else. I've heard this probably 100 times. These narratives take root and then you can't let go. They're all stupid. They're not real. By the way, maybe if there is some truth to them, that's fine. Let's talk about it. Let's argue about it. But do people even know the other side of the argument? People know the narrative about all of these things and they don't know the counter narrative. Nobody's going and looking up the data on this stuff. And when you do, most of the narratives fall apart. By the way, I think that these are really important things to talk about. There's this weird, I am being humble if I self-deprecate in ways that are totally unaligned with real data. I don't think that's pleasing to our Heavenly Father. I don't think it's a good thing for us to tell narratives that aren't true and think that somehow we're doing some good thing. These are three little anecdotes, three little pictures that mean a lot to me. They're evidence that I think BYU-Idaho is a magical place. These are pictures of me with students, pictures of specific things that I remember. By the way, those two are the same person. She's now my TA. I could tell you anecdotes all day. Let's turn to some data. Oh, sorry. One last picture. What is it? I love that BYU-Idaho is the hidden gem of the church educational system, if we can get rid of the word hidden. And I think that's my take on what President Meredith is saying with this whole conference. We have a story to tell that deserves telling. We are doing amazing things. Let's get that message out there. Okay, I want to start by asking a question. What do you think the university of 50 years from now will look like? Turn and talk to a neighbor. There is no wrong answer. Actually, I should rephrase. Almost all of them are wrong answers. So don't feel any stress. But go ahead and talk to your neighbor. And 1 minute, maybe two. I'm going to be grumpy and steal your time back. Take 30 seconds to a minute. What do you imagine might be the university of the future? I'm going to take it away. I don't want you to look at Mr. DeWitt over there. Okay, ready, set, go. My Zoom friends, you can talk to each other in the chat. They won't be able to hear you that way. That way you're not talking in the whole room. Wrap up in 10 more seconds. All righty. And now, just for the sake of the group, why don't we take, I don't know, why don't we take 2 or 3? If you had, we don't bet. So if you had Monopoly money that you were putting down, what would you put that nice orange 500 on? What do you think is the most likely thing that you might see in 50 years about universities and higher education? What trends do you think you might see? Please.
Massive cratering of enrollment.
Massive cratering in enrollment. Fabulous. Yes.
See a way different improvement in teaching pedagogy.
Way huge improvement in teaching pedagogy. Yes.
I think it's the proliferation of like modalities. and
Good.
Modalities.
Good. Way different modalities. Others. I said 3. We got time for more. Go here and then here.
Possibly more remote virtual reality. Meetings,
Yes.
That type of
Yes, actually, I feel bad because some of you have hit on things that we're going to talk about later. And my key takeaway is you think they're coming, but they're already here. Right? Online is not coming. Online has arrived. Right? AI is not coming. AI is here. Please, yes.
I think it's going to include 3D holographic lab.
Good. Okay. Oh, I'm so glad that did anybody recognize this man when he popped up for a second? Anybody know who that is? Okay, we'll come back to him in a second. I saw a couple of other hands and I feel like I called on somebody and I skipped him. Yeah, please.
I just think it might be a lot the same.
Oh, interesting. I like that hardcore traditionalist view. Yeah.
I think it's gonna be more specialized, just like we have our 3-year degrees now, where we've taken away all the electives.
Yeah.
I think the demand is gonna be, I just want what I need to get the job I wanna get. And that's what universities are gonna provide.
Everybody's complained for a long time. Well, universities are just going to turn into trade schools. I think we need to investigate some assumptions about why being a trade school is a bad thing. When I taught kids in Baltimore, going to a trade school is a phenomenal option for them. The question is, are they getting what they need out of it? And what does that look like? What does that mean? What are our assumptions? What's the cultural baggage that we bring when we say college versus trade school? I saw another hand. Yeah.
I think it might be a hybrid of trade school and university.
Good.
Some skill-based modules that could maybe lead to a minor or something, but you'd still have a major, but a big skill focus.
By the way, we're going to talk about online a lot today. My suspicion is that my hope, I should say, right now, what we tend to do with online, and I don't just mean here, I mean everywhere, is we say, where can we save some money on online? I think that's a terrible way to look at it. Not because money isn't important, but you won't save money and you also won't provide value for students. If you actually want to solve it, you say, what of these classes make sense in person and which of these deserve to be online? Where can I provide a phenomenal educational experience for kids online? And where you can't do a senior practicum class in education online. I don't know of a way to do that. My Ed 304 class could be built, constructed, and delivered online really, really effectively. That's a really, really cool way to think. That's very different from how we currently do. Please.
This might be on the really radical side of the paradigm.
Ah.
What's stopping these large employers from saying, you know what, we know exactly what we want out of people who work for us. We're going to handle the teaching, training. Let's just eliminate university altogether and give our future employees exactly what we want them to know.
Would you be shocked if I said that one's not coming? It's already here. Yes.
So similar to what I was thinking of, I'm hoping that in the future, we're using more data-driven ways to determine what the needs of the future are going to be and preparing
Fabulous.
the workforce that's going to be necessary for the jobs that will be in the.
By the way, I have to shout out my homie, Daniel Moncayo. He wrote a great thing in perspective called Minimizing Regret. And at first I thought it was going to be some deep psychology. And instead, he's an economist. He went through and analyzed which majors end up feeling regret for having majored in that major. It's really interesting data, right? And like, that's something that we should know and we should talk about and we should figure out, okay, what are we providing a value and how do we make sure that it's of high value? Okay, this is, it's Tyler DeWitt. And Tyler DeWitt has a great TED Talk. And he does something really interesting in this. He said, he kind of always expected, these are screenshots. I'm sorry, I had closed captions on, so it upended my life as hanging out there kind of, portentously. But he has a theory. And the theory is that YouTube has already competed against universities in every way except one. And it's the only thing that universities still have and are holding on to. And when that dam breaks, it's all coming apart. And I think he's right. What do you think might it be that YouTube can't compete with universities over? Give it a shot.
Say sports and that feeling of belonging to something.
Good. Sports and that feeling of belonging. I agree. Not the one I was thinking of, but I'll give it. Yes. Thank you. You nailed it. Here's his picture. It's kind of funny looking. Ignore the funny looking and just look at the picture. Okay. Instead of a graduation robe, we have a quilt. And I go to Salt Lake Community College and I take 5 credits there because they're really cheap and I just want to get them done. And then I go to MIT for 3 months and I do some lab classes in a lab with scientists. Then I fly to Central America and I do an in-depth training and, a 2-month experience where I learn Spanish and have an international experience. Then I go to a campus nearby my hometown and I get a couple of months there because it's really cheap and inexpensive, but I know that they have a really good professor doing that. Imagine Rate My Professor, but instead of 2 or 3 options, you have 10,000. The credential is what forces students to stay with the university. And if somebody can figure out a way to mix and match and unbundle the credential, first of all, I think it would be really, really good. It would be terrible for universities. They would fall apart. But all of a sudden now, each student can pick and choose what is the most meaningful experience that I need for my employment, for my future, that is the highest benefit to me, lowest cost option. And you can mix and match thousands of different variables, whether it's cost or location, or whether it's in person. By the way, Tyler DeWitt is the guy who does VR. I want to say it's biology labs, and it's taking off like wildfire. And he said, everybody loves my classes. The problem is they say, well, yeah, but why would I take your class if I can't get credit for it? So one of the things that I think is going to really shift things is shifting away from teaching and toward, but what did that mean? What are we talking about when we say, yeah, you took 2 credits? 2 credits of what? What can you do because you took that class? How did it change you? How is it meaningful to me as an employer? Okay, this is just a little bit of, what would you say? Overview, I guess. I'm surprised actually at my own arrogance. It worked out really well for me, but I was not supposed to interview with President Eyring when I interviewed for my job here. I was applying for a visiting position, and I don't know if something got mixed up or if the Lord, moved some papers, but I got interviewed by President Eyring, and it was really cool. He said, "So why do you want to work here?" And I said, "Well," and I was caught completely off guard, but the only thing I could think of was to tell him the actual truth. "Well, I read a really great book. It's called The Innovative University. You might have heard of it." And he started laughing. It's his book. He was the one that wrote it. That's a little bit, gutsy to say. And then we had a 15-minute conversation about universities and higher education and what it looks like. Now, this is my mildly terrible simplification of disruptive innovation in higher ed, okay? It's not about doing more. It's about doing less more effectively. So these are some things that I just wrote up really quick off the top of my head. These are things that universities do well, okay? That a lot of universities feel pressure to do. And when President Hinckley announced that we were going to have BYU-Idaho, he basically just went, all of that is gone, and we're focusing on this. We're going to do discipleship and teaching. And whatever it takes to do those 2 things, and everything else is secondary. By the way, I think that's incredible leadership. I know, by the way, now it seems so obvious, but at the time, I'm sure it was unpopular. It caused feelings. It had, all of those things associated with it. But I think it was inspired leadership. Now, we'll come back to that. Let's come back to that. Okay, let's get into trends. So here are some trends that I think are currently here or are coming over the next 10 years. Okay. Number 1, we got a bunch of stuff about research, R1 universities, right? We have plagiarism, we have lack of citations, we have all that stuff. Number 2, we have politicization, right? Number 3, we have cost and debt. And this is something you'll hear about in the news all the time. Is our cost low enough? We've got to lower our costs. Number 4, we are seeing a different group of students than we have ever seen before. I think that is wonderful news. The average student today is basically the average of the US citizen, right? That's really exciting. That means that most US citizens now have access to a college education. What's concerning is they all have access and more of them are choosing not to go. Okay. Number 5, like I said, online and AI, they aren't coming, they are here. Here's just a very quick sampling of some screenshots of news articles. So this one was an interesting one. It said, in the latest twist of the publishing arms race, firms churning out fake papers have taken to directly bribing journal editors. Are 90% of academic papers really never cited? Reviewing the literature on academic citations. Basically, the premise here is, are most academic papers only read by 2 reviewers and maybe the researcher's mother? The answer was no, that's a wild overstatement. It's more like 80% in the humanities. And in medicine, good news, it's a lot lower. It's only some fields that have this citation problem where nobody's actually reading the papers, and we're clearly only doing this so that people can get tenure. By the way, yes, please.
One of the comments you made earlier was, the students will be able to pay for what they need and get what and I look at some of this stuff and I think, I don't know if the students know what they need and they know they don't know that they know that.
Fair.
And I don't see a lot of, let's say mildly motivated or unmotivated students going online and finding the resources for themselves. It's kind of like, show up at university, save me.
Yeah.
In a year or two, I'll find my path.
I suspect that the way that this is going to happen is it will be Google comes to the student and says, I will give you a job. The first 3 months will be training. And so Google is going to directly replace, because I think you're right. I think the student may have some sense, but may not have a full sense of what do I need. I will also push back just a little bit and say, I am not always convinced that if we really looked at it hard and we passed our program and all of its credits and all of its assessments, and we took it to employers and said, which of these are fluff? What would you cut? I don't think that most employers would say, no, it's perfect, pristine, wouldn't cut a thing, perfect. Every skill that they need, they will have. And there's no waste of time. I think we're better about it here, by the way. I think we are very credit conscious. But I think universities generally, I happen to know of a couple of universities where the majors are approaching 80, 90 credits. Just insane numbers of like, you're leaving with a master's degree. It's not a bachelor's anymore. What are you doing? Right? And I think there's just kind of this credit inflation that's happening where it's like, if we can get them even more, and we can jam it in. One of the things that happens is a lot of times this will happen in GE, right? Where we'll say, you can take any of these classes and they'll count for your GE. But if you're an engineering major, guess what all of your GE credits are going to be? History and history and philosophy of engineering. And all of the engineering credits that you can fit in, and all of your GE classes just go to serve the major. And so I think there are a lot of things that you're seeing like that. By the way, I should be a little bit more fair. She does go through really deliberately here and say, there are papers that are cited, and there are fields where it is better and worse. But there are some fields where it's a real problem, and we should probably look at. The Consolidation Disruption Index. This is a really fun one. Derek Thompson, he calls it science has a crummy paper problem. Basically, there's an index that you can look at for, does the paper overturn something that was widely held? Or does the paper confirm something that was widely held? Are these disruptive papers? Or are these consolidating papers? And the shift has been very rapid in the last 20 years. Academic papers are no longer, in general, overturning widely held beliefs. They are primarily confirming other things that people have said, almost as though we've created a structure where you are rewarded if you publish papers. And the papers are being written on the basis of publishing papers and not because they are forwarding the work of truth. Stanford president resigns after fallout from falsified data. Next one, Harvard president Claudine Gay resigns. Next one, Penn's leadership resigns amid controversies. This one's a little bit separate, okay? And now we have Governor Cox just actually signed an anti-DEI bill prohibiting diversity efforts that he once championed. Well, I mean, that's the Salt Lake Tribune, so they have opinions. Okay. Now, really quickly, I want to go back. These are the problems that are currently in the news media. This is the current 24-hour news cycle. What are the things that insulate BYU-Idaho from the things that you just read about? Did any of you get the sense of like, wait a minute, that doesn't even apply to us? Like, research problems. Do we have problems with plagiarization in our publications? I mean, I hope we don't. Why are we insulated? That's exactly right. The strategy was really, really good for our students, but it also happened to protect us in really, really deep ways, right? Politicization. I've talked about, like, it always makes me chuckle when I hear that BYU-Idaho is what, the third most conservative, whatever in the nation. Listen, I know conservatives. I know very strong conservatives. I'm sure that there are some on campus. I don't know of anybody, I shouldn't say that. I can think it feels outside the norm and actually quite inappropriate at BYU-Idaho for somebody to bring their politics to the fore. This is not our job. Our job is to prepare students for the workforce, to give them hard, clear-cut skills that they can use in a meaningful way. So by cutting out a lot of this other stuff and saying, no, our job is teaching, that is a philosophy. By the way, I should say this for myself because yeah, Isaac, please.
I think President Hinckley said teaching and advice.
Good. Yes. And actually, one of the things you will find is that relationships with students, I would say, is actually part of the core mission, right? It is deep and profound. And later we'll talk about class size. I think part of the reason why we've been really careful about class size is the relationship factor. And I think that's a really wonderful part. Let me just add a couple of other thoughts from me, just my own personal opinion. Whoop, where'd they go? Here we go. I don't know that apolitical is quite right because we actually have a philosophy. We really do. It's called the gospel of Jesus Christ. And anybody who says, oh, we're neutral. No, you're not. There's no such thing. I do not believe you. If you say you're neutral, I am going to run screaming away. When you are grounded to a specific philosophy, that's when I can trust you. And ours is truth. Ours is helping students. Ours is the gospel of Jesus Christ. When somebody says that they are neutral, that just tells me that they're falling for things and they don't even realize it. Okay. Number two, and I don't know how to say this except that it's great students. I teach pathway students. I teach the kids of farmers. I teach kids who didn't really think that they were going to college. And boy, they're not really that interested in my opinions about weird abstract theories. They want to be a mom or a dad. They want to be a teacher in a school. They want to make a difference for kids. This is not a place where you come if you want status. I think that's a wonderful blessing and a huge protection, not just for our students, but for me too. Right? They're here for the right reasons. These are humble kids that just want to make a difference. I love President Hinckley. I know you're not geniuses, but the work of the world isn't done by geniuses. It's done by regular people trying to make a difference in their homes and their communities. I really do think that no research, I shouldn't say no research, we focus on teaching and learning, and that's a real one, right? But there's no rat race here. There's no rank. There's no status. It's, if you're here, put your shoulder to the wheel, plug in, do the best that you can. I really do think that we focus on teaching. Boy, the hiring process is a thing here, right? Like I went through it 3.5 years ago. I still, wake up with cold sweats, but it's inspired. And I really believe that, right? Last but not least, I already talked about the strategy. I think our leadership is different, right? We have a different structure and we also have inspired leadership. And I think it's wonderful. And I can't neglect our mission, which I think is divinely inspired. Okay, so we've talked about these. I think we are phenomenally poised to tackle all of this. This is stuff that's not even it's either not gonna affect us or it's stuff that we're in a really good position to tackle. Now let me get into stuff that I see coming over the next 50. This is data that I took from online. This is my graph, that's why it's ugly. But it's online data. And I think you can see what's going on at the top there, right? It's starting to come back down. I think a couple of you said, I see a real big drop in enrollment coming. Again, that's already happened. And I'll show you some more data on that in just a moment. So I think competency-based ed is one of the things that's coming in the next 50 years. For those of you who don't know what competency-based ed is, it's a really nerdy thing that a few teachers like to talk about. Here's how it works. Khan Academy. That's competency-based. Except at the end, maybe you get a little credential or a badge that says, hey, you finished 6th grade math, and we'll send you a little thing in the mail. And then I go to the school district and I say, I'm not putting him in 6th grade math. He already did 6th grade math. But sir, he's 10. Yes, I know. I'm a math teacher. I made him do 6th grade math when he was 10. Of course he's done. But I'm not going to put him in a 6th grade math class. The rise of homeschooling, alternative education, and all of these things that are happening in K-12 are accelerating this weird thing that's happening where kids are coming to us with way more gaps and also way more competencies. We used to kind of assume that everybody coming in was like a standard batch, right? Everybody came in, they graduated from, by the way, they never were, right? They were never a standard batch, not academically. But we could kind of assume that they knew how to do the same basic set of things. And now they're coming to us with, calculus mastered and no social skills. Or they know like 18 years of random history facts and they're not super good with handwriting. There's just this really weird thing where students are getting all sorts of opportunities and it's not as even keeled as it was before. I think that we're going to see a lot of that. Mental health has actually already arrived. I just didn't have space in the other one. I just don't see any evidence that that's going to shift anytime soon. So that's one to be aware of. There is more and more clamor to end the 4-year model. I'm a big fan of that. I love the fact that I get to take classes while I'm at BYU-Idaho, and I take advantage. It is great. I am currently taking 2 statistics classes, and boy, has my dissertation started going faster. And it's wonderful, right? I think there are a lot of people who are like, hey, maybe I could get a job really fast, and then I could take 2 or 3 credits every semester for the rest of my life. That's a really compelling model. And I think there's good reason to think that maybe we could be headed in that direction. First year success, I'll talk about in a minute. Empowered students. This is a polite way of saying, folks, they're getting choosy. And they're about to, I think they're going to get more and more choosy. Okay. Here's my example. If you have 10,000 different teachers and rate my professor, you're going to pick from all 5 out of 5 teachers. I think this is especially going to start happening in online. At the beginning, online was about convenience. And now students are starting to say to me, oh, no, take this one online. It's really well designed. Don't take this one. It's too much fluff, too much boring, too much busy work. They are now starting to evaluate different courses on the basis of the content of the class, right? I think that's really exciting, but we have to think through that. By the way, I'll give you my opinion. When I am now course lead, it's very exciting. Lots of extra work. Somebody asked me, they said, so we need to, do some work for the online class. And I said, great, I've never done this. What do I do? And they said, well, build your in-person class and then just kind of copy it over. And every part of my educator body just went, ah. I taught in Zoom and I taught in person. And when I taught hybrid, it was a disaster. I'm really good at either one and I'm no good at both. When we start designing online classes as online classes, different from our in-person classes because they are fundamentally different, students are going to say, no, I want to take that online class because I've heard it's so good. Not because it's convenient, not because it's cheaper, not because it's easier on my schedule, but because that teacher who designed that class is so effective that they are better than my in-person options. And I absolutely think we can do that. By the way, fun little thought experiment. If we had no degree structure, if it was just pick and choose classes from anywhere that you wanted to, how many of our classes would be selected by students on purpose? If you could compete at the level of the course, not the degree, the individual course, how many students would say, yeah, I'm going to take that BYU-Idaho course because it's phenomenal. And I've heard it's phenomenal. The teacher prepares the right amount of work and it's not too hard, but it's really, really intense and rigorous and it changes your life. Those are the kinds of courses that students want to have access to and are increasingly clamoring for. Okay, let's do a couple more. That's the last 10 years. US enrollment. Now, by the way, the graph doesn't end at 0, so it's not as dramatic as it looks, right? Be aware, I'm not trying to be evil. That's just what Excel did when I put in the numbers. Okay, but the college enrollment has gone down significantly. And very, very clearly, a high of 18 down to 15.5. Now, people will tell you, and they are right, that part of this is a demographic cliff. Okay, we just have fewer 18-year-olds right now because 18 years ago, people weren't having as many babies. That's totally accurate. It still doesn't explain most of this. That's my read. Okay, some of this is a demographic cliff. Some of this is that somebody's competing and we're losing students to the competition. All right, so this is a fun one. An article in Inside Higher Ed, a look back at college closures and mergers. Whole articles describing how many colleges are closing, primarily small liberal arts private colleges, right? And the first year that happened, they were like, yeah, this is really weird. We've been growing the number of colleges for 20, 30, 50, 100, 200 years. But yeah, we closed a few this year on average. We didn't open as many as we closed. So that's kind of weird. Then the next year was like, yeah, we closed even more this year. The next year, we closed even more this year. There's a really great article a long time ago. Clayton Christensen made a bet. And his bet was, I think it was about 2017, 2018. He said, over the next 10 years, I predict that 50% of colleges and universities will close in the United States. Made some people really mad, especially university presidents. They don't like that at all. And so this is a university president saying, how dare you? I bet you $1 million. I don't think he knows that Clayton Christensen is now doing work on the other side of the veil. So that's, a little bit cheating to be like, I bet you, I don't think Clayton Christensen is going to pay out $1 million. Okay. But more importantly, I think that might have been a little bit too soon for Clayton Christensen. We still have 5 or 6 years left on that bet. And the trend is not going well for the other side. Colleges are decreasing. You already saw the enrollment numbers. Okay. The other part of this is if you ignore the enrollment numbers, you ask people, do you have faith in college? Do you think college is a good thing? Do you trust that colleges are educating our youth in good ways? It's like 36%. That is historically low. When I was growing up, college was what everybody did. That was what good people did. And now today it's, oh, I don't know about that, man. That's where they indoctrinate people. Or I don't know. Do you really need a college degree? There has been a fundamental shift. By the way, I'm happy to be corrected on this by any of you if I'm wrong. I have noticed a shift in the way that General Conference talks about education. When I was growing up, it was get as much education as you can. I still hear that education is a religious responsibility. I still hear that we need to be educated. I don't hear quite as much emphasis on college. I hear a lot more emphasis on do everything that you can to be educated, to get skills and those kinds of things. Like it's subtle, but the subtle differences I have noticed because I've been listening for them. Again, if I'm wrong, I'd be happy to be pointed to directions.
Next question, one of the big things I know when I was younger, and I still feel, is that college life was for the social life, finding a companion, all that. If you look at some of the statistics I've been reading, a lot of our young people they're just pulling back. They're not even having social life. I think, I mean, just think the church just did this all date night thing. They're trying to get, and I'm wondering if by losing the students or the young people losing that, the things, articles I've read said that they've been investing in more in computer girlfriends, this kind of stuff. Is that gonna be a big thing that's gonna cause the decline in college attendance because they're not interested in that social life?
My opinion, strongly yes. And by the way, I take the Jonathan Haidt view on this. I mentioned him earlier. He's a psychologist that's doing a lot of work on this. I think that a lot of students are just more risk averse than they've ever been. They are looking for safety and protection and coddling. Going off to college far away from home, being pushed out of the nest is scary, right? Dating is risky. People say no, it hurts. It's not fun. I love what President and Sister Meredith did on date night. I thought it was phenomenal, right? By the way, I know President Oaks had something to do with it because they did it at all the BYU campuses, right? I could not be more a fan. When you go out and you ask somebody out and they say no, you become a stronger guy, right? You become a stronger person no matter who you are, right? I think that that is one of the key things. And by the way, I will argue University of the Future is going to be a lot less of sit down, here's our class, and a lot more of here's how we're going to change your character to be the kind of person that isn't just employable, but a leader. Let's put you through experiences that make you into a different kind of person that can lead in the home or in the family or in the community. Okay. Good news. We're doing some really cool stuff, friends. This is my friend, Stephen Cranny of the Deseret News. It was pretty special. Stephen is awesome. He's a sociologist and demographer. Keep trying to get him to come up here and teach here. He ran an analysis on this. Latter-day Saints have significantly fewer student loans. Gee, I wonder why. Was there something you'd like to share with the whole class, Brother Trujillo?
Pay our tithe and go to church.
That's right. We pay our tithe and go to church, and then we end up at BYU-Idaho, and magic happens, right? This is phenomenal, and we really are doing this. By the way, I should show you. I think it's on the next slide. Yeah, here it is. So a friend of mine, actually, I'm going to pull up the actual graph because it's just really cool. So this is data, and I don't know when this one was from. My dean sent this out, okay? But you'll notice that the top ROI, that means return on investment, of all of these universities was BYU-Idaho with 18%. Now, it's always cool when you see one point of data, but you always go, okay, am I cherry picking? Am I just looking at the best data? A friend of mine sent this to me. He's a data guy, visualization really heavy. Oh, no, go back. Wait. Was it the next one? Is that what I did wrong? Where did I go? No, I thought I was past that. Oh, here it is. There's a link right there. Oh, it's not letting me go to the link. Oh, it's going back. I get it. I'm clicking on the bar, but that's where the link is. Gosh darn it. Let me see. Let's see if it pops up. There it is. Here we go. So here's the graph that my friend made. Scrape data from the internet. Dallin Crum, awesome guy. By this 2018 data. Okay. Now I do have to do one little thing. You'll notice that there's a problem with these. Naval, military, the merchant marine. So I have to exclude from the school types the service academies because they have some advantages, right? But now let's look and see. So if you go over here, wait, hold on. Am I on 20? Let's go to annual ROI because it's a different measure. So this over here is Harvey Mudd. This right here is MIT. So the way to think about this graph, okay, is that the top is high ROI and the bottom, I can scroll down really quick, is 4-year cost. So these are really expensive colleges over here that have high ROI. These are really expensive colleges that have low ROI. Don't go there. That's a terrible idea. I don't want to hover over. I feel guilty even saying that, right? On this side, we have low ROI, but low cost. So you're getting something useless, but at least you're not paying something very much for it. And up in here, in this quadrant, right up in here, we have high ROI, low cost. Well, gee, that's weird. There's this big outlier over here. Oh, I swear I cut you out. Go away, Merchant Marine Academy.
You did, but then you changed it.
Oh, that's why. Curse you, Tableau. All right, let's go back here. Here's the outlier. Folks, we're killing it. We're doing something really cool. And by the way, this is pay scale data. This isn't our data. As you go to payscale.com and you say, okay, graduates at BYU-Idaho, how do they do compared to other people? We take the averages, we take the salaries, we look at the that's what it's from. By the way, I should throw a little bit of love to our sister schools. There's BYU-Idaho. They're doing good too. Not as good as us, but they're doing very well. Okay. There's BYU Provo, and down here's BYU Hawaii. Okay. We have a lot to be proud of in this term, right? And in thinking about it this way. Okay, now I've got to open up the right slideshow and hide the thing again and open this. Here we go. There we go. And hide this. And we're back. All righty. So good stuff. Now, we already talked about that. Oh, that's moving me backwards. Okay. This is data that I pulled from online. BYU-Idaho is not totally immune from this. Okay? And I recognize that. We've had a small but real decrease in students. And so I think we need to think about that. But when you remember what that national graph looked like, we are doing comparatively quite well. And that's worth keeping in mind. Okay. By the way, I do want to just throw this up there because it's something that I think about a lot. This is by gender. That's in millions. That's national trends in the bottom left corner. And the top one is female. I have some really strong feelings about making sure that women succeed. I feel really, really strongly about. And I also have really strong feelings about making sure that men succeed. And right now, like GPAs and college attendance and a lot of other metrics, like men are having some struggles. And it's worth talking about that and thinking through that. Okay. So we mentioned this earlier. What if they just cut out the middleman? And they say, we're just going to get rid of it. This is from this year. Nearly half of companies say they plan to eliminate bachelor's degree requirements in 2024. Now, the good news is I polled a bunch of students and they said that they're going to university for more reasons than just a job. But they also said that their number one reason for going to school was a job. Yes.
So that's the number of companies. What's the size of the employer? Like, are those the half that only have one employee anyways? Or are those
my impression is that these are little known firms that you might not have heard of, like Google and Apple. And I think a lot, by the way, state governments and federal governments. And by the way, I recognize that it hurts us and it may in the long term have some bad effects. I'm wondering why we ever required college degrees when people could do the job without one. Is that just a form of economic protectionism? If the jobs are actually able to train them up, what were we doing requiring college degrees? We're keeping a whole set of people out. My grandparents didn't have, none of my grandparents had college degrees. They didn't talk about it much. They weren't proud of it. Didn't come up at family dinners. I'm sensitive to that. And if there's a way that we can still give a really good education and allow people to get access to jobs without a college degree, I think there's a moral case to be made for that somehow. So I will just say by the way, these are splashy headlines, so you're probably right to investigate a little bit. By all means, please feel free. But I think I probably saw 15 or 20 of these articles when I Googled it. By the way, the other big group that is doing this is the federal government. So one of the areas that it seems Republicans and Democrats align on is that occupational licensure, like if you have a college degree, that's great, but like we need people in the military. We need people to serve. We need people in cities to do various jobs. And if there isn't a direct connection between we need the college degree because of this set of skills, they're looking at it and saying, why? We can get people out of high school. They work hard. They're eager. We can pay them decently. There's a real push on this. Yeah.
With your thing there, you're out of high school and they're eager and all that. I don't know if you've ever heard of Google Summer of Code. I had a son who kind of was leaning to that. To me, it's a way of taking advantage of young people.
Yeah.
And
because some of those coding camps are disastrous.
Well, they go down there, they bring their ideas. Google says, bring your idea. You know, you have to present it first. They go down there, they program for Google. Google finds its very best people that way, and they own the idea and they own their code. And I think in some ways, at least in my math class, one of the things I'm sharing is ways companies do take advantage.
Yeah.
And they'll take advantage in different things. And you know, I don't know, maybe there's more to this, you know, the companies that want to bring in these guys and train them because. Already at high school, they can take advantage of them a whole lot.
Well, and let me add to your point and then give the other side and argue a little bit. First, to add to your point, let's say that you go to Google and you get training for 3 months and then you lose your job. You're no longer trained for a job elsewhere, right? And so there really is something about a college degree where it's like, this is a set of skills that you can hopefully take to a lot of different places. Now, here's where I'll argue just a little bit. I know of colleges, and I'm not even sure they realize that they're doing something wrong, who will admit students with such a low probability of success in a 4-year degree that the student will go and get a loan that they cannot discharge through bankruptcy. They will take a bunch of classes for a year or two, so they'll lose a year or two of their life, right? Spending time in classes that they are not prepared to take, they are not prepared to pass. The student fails out. Now they've lost a couple of years, a couple of years of wages too, and they have a bunch of debt that they cannot discharge. And the university says, well, at least we tried because we believed in that kid. There's a real moral issue for me about what guarantee of success can we give to those students. By the way, I'm probably unpopular on this. I know that we talk a lot about for-profit schools. In my mind, that's a tax designation. I know that there are bad actors who are for-profit schools, and I'm open to that discussion. There are nonprofits who accept students and make a lot of money off of them when there isn't a real meaningful chance of success. And that's something that I think we could have a really juicy conversation about another day. Gen Z could wave goodbye to resumes because most companies have turned to skills-based recruitment and find it more effective, research shows. So this is really simple. You do some exploratory factor analysis. Those of you who are statisticians, you know a little bit about what this is, and you figure out what predicts if somebody's going to be a phenomenal hire for my company. And then you take those people and you give them a survey, and everybody's applying and they take the survey, and you look for the people who fit that mold. By the way, there's problems with that because you're going to get the same kind of person in that field, and that causes problems. But here's what's really interesting. I'll give you just a quick one from education. If I asked you, what are the personality traits that make for a great K-12 educator? What would you say? Throw them out, popcorn them, just shout them out.
They care.
They care. Good. What else?
Yes.
Enthusiasm. What else? Patience. What else?
Pass the background check.
They can pass a background check. Thank you for aiming low. Okay. What's that?
Content. knowledge.
Content knowledge. You got to be smart. What else?
Willing to work.
What's that?
I was gonna say, willing to work for.
Yeah, good. Both of you were like, they have to be just a little bit dumb, right? They need to be smart in content and not know that how present value of money works. I ask my students this every semester, and it's amazing how often the responses are the same. They almost always say the same set of things. You have to love your kids. You have to be compassionate. You have to be kind. You have to be patient. They actually run this analysis on the 5-factor model of personality. The model predicts most effectively, and they're small, right? There's more variation between people than there is on the model. But the one thing that they found that was actually pretty significant was the more disagreeable you are, the better the teacher you become. That's why this is powerful. We don't have a class on how to be disagreeable as a teacher. I mean, they're my classes, actually. I actually do teach that a little bit. Just you need to know how to be assertive and how to talk to a parent and how to calm a kid down when he's angry, right? You need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet. But that's not what we think of. So when you actually run the data and you design a test, you can get really, really good candidates who are already ready to step into that role. And a lot of people aren't even thinking about that stuff. We're talking about coding camps. We already covered this, by the way. As I looked up coding camps, about 10 articles were negative for every 10 that were positive, right? It was a real mix. I am not recommending this. What I am saying is that employers are getting wise, and they're starting to ask some really interesting questions about, they really need a 4-year degree? Or can we get a few more years out of them instead? Okay, we already talked about Tyler DeWitt. So looking to the future, this is where I just shoot from the hip and hope I'm saying true things. Let's see if I can hit a few, and then hopefully I'll wrap up with a time for a question or two. So number one, who do I think is going to be the competition? Number one, I think it's going to be Western Governors University. Western Governors University is fascinating. 10 years ago, I was, no, it wasn't 10 years ago. It was probably, let's see, it's been 3.5, and it was 4 years before that, 7 years ago. I was sitting in my first hiring meeting as an assistant principal. I was a young assistant principal in Washington, D.C. And I saw Western Governors University, and I went, I heard about that. That's like Mike Levitt and those governors from the West. It's all competency-based. Like, this is really cool. And everybody said, I've never heard of that. All right, bring them in for an interview. Now, a couple of years later, they said, oh, I've heard of that one. Yeah, it's up and down. It's hit and miss with those people. 2 years after that. Yeah, it used to be hit and miss. Now they're pretty good. Western Governors University took all of their chips and put it into one pile. Assessment and accreditation and credentialing. BYU-Idaho, for very good reason, put all of our chips into teaching. Now, I'm not arguing we should take any of those chips out. What I'm arguing is that good teaching is good credentialing. It is also thinking about how do we stamp on a kid or badge them or something to say they are leaving with actual small discrete pieces of knowledge that are meaningful to whoever they could be hired by. And I'll give you a mental anchor for that in a minute. People always say, well, I think education should be free. Well, good news, it is. It's the credentialing that costs something. I tried this out. I went to Harvard X. I went to MIT online. I went to a couple of places. It's really funny. You can do this. You can find out what the fee is to take the adjunct classes, the online classes. And the fee was like $5, $10. And then it said underneath, and if you want a certificate, it's $80. The education market is basically saturated. Education, we are getting outcompeted all day, every day. Education is on YouTube. It's free. The credential is what costs.
Don't we have multiple countries that have free higher education already?
Yeah. But the question is, I'm going to not get into my personal political feelings on making higher education free. The issue to me is that, well, let me back up and say it this way. If your model of education is based on the idea that if we only give out 10 ribbons, then they're worth more. And if we give out 20, it dilutes the pool. You're going to run into problems really, really quickly. That's part of the old model that, by the way, I think we get right here at BYU-Idaho. We want to improve every student who comes through our doors. We are not looking to send people away. We are not trying to say you're not a good enough student. And that's really powerful. There are still institutions that are saying, no, we only cream from the top, and it's going to eat them very quickly. That's my personal opinion. The other problem, though, is that you're seeing a lot of this with everybody has a college degree, and there's an underemployment problem, especially in specific fields, where there are people with certain degrees where it's not giving them any leg up because there's 100 different people that have that same degree, and it just doesn't show that they have specific skills. By the way, I would say the biggest one, this is the classic argument against monopoly, right? Well, if there's nobody else to compete against, then we have to take down the monopoly. Well, guess what? There's always the choice of non-consumption. And people are picking it at really high rates, right? People are not choosing Khan Academy or Western Governors. A lot of people are just saying, I'm just going to get a job. I'm going to figure it out from there. Okay, value proposition. How can we increase value? Well, first of all, we're already killing it. So let's just remember that, right? But if we're serious, I think we're already kind of on our way there, right? Fewer majors and minors. I've already gotten that feeling from the university. We've just got to be really choosy in what we choose to do so we can do it well. And I love that. I think focus is the key. Above that, I said expand online options. I think we're already heading that way, and that's great. Again, I would argue we need to focus on quality with that, because when I talk to students, they're starting to get much, much choosier. This is going to get me in trouble, but I'm sorry. I know too much of the education research literature. I really think class size is not the thing we think it is. And when you look at the education research literature in K-12, you find it very, very clearly. There's about this much of a gain when you reduce class sizes. But there's about this much of a gain when you put a great teacher in front of students. If you isolate it to just this, yeah, class sizes are better. But when you make the trade of the two, this teacher who is phenomenal, a 5-star, look, let me put it to you this way. You've got a student and they go on Rate My Professor and they find a 5-star teacher whose class is full. They're at 40. There's one opening. And then down the hallway, they find somebody who's got 3 stars, but their class is open. They've only got 20. Which one do they pick?
I can just get on your wait list.
Yeah, that's what they say too, just like that. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
You know, President Clark used to always say class size is different. I mean, if I'm teaching a higher level class, I want a smaller class.
Agreed.
We can work together. But if I'm teaching 108, my math 108 class, I want a bigger group so we can get discussion, because a lot of those kids
Totally agreed.
will hold back, and I can't get the discussion I need.
I totally agree.
Class size is not just this.
Not good or bad, but contextual, right? I'm thinking of Elder Robbins and the puzzle pieces. What is the purpose and what for this class? If I'm teaching senior practicum, I can't teach 40 kids. I don't have time to observe that many. If I'm teaching Ed 304, I can. By the way, the argument that I tend to hear with class size is, no, don't change class size, because that's going to, we need the relationship. Okay, but if that's why we're doing it, are they building that relationship in the online class that they're taking instead? Sometimes they do. John Trujillo teaches a great online class. But I would rather have a large class for me, with me at the head, where I can interact with the students, than an online class that's a little bit more faceless. So I think there's some real interesting stuff that we can do there that could make a difference. Down a little bit more. Oh, I love this. I was in Jay Hathaway's class the other day. Jay's great. And he looked at one of his students. He said, "Do you have a job yet?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "Good. Do you have a job yet?" He just started going around for this is a senior class. And he just goes by each one and says, "Do you have a job yet?" One goes, "No, I don't." He said, "That's okay. Bring me your resume. Can you have it to me by the end of the day? We're going to get it up there. We're going to make sure he is taking personal responsibility for making sure that his students are on the right footing for when they leave the university." And I think that's amazing and that's incredible. And that's what it should be. Talk about networking. By the way, another big push, another trend that I think is coming, apprenticeships and internships. I am excited about it. Boy, I love education. I love ranting in my classroom. I think I do a really good rant. I think students would learn more if they are in an internship in schools with a fabulous mentor teacher, like an apprenticeship, than they ever would with me. And I think states are starting to get wise to this and starting to realize, oh, this credentialing stuff that we have doesn't really actually predict whether somebody's a good teacher. Next one, the new student class. I'm almost done and I want to give you a little bit of time. I think the university is well aware of this, that BYU-Idaho, but like the first year determines so much more. Pathway Connect versus the rest of the 3 years of Pathway. The BYU-Idaho freshman experience, if we can keep them during that time, changes everything. It's a really powerful thing. I love the investments we're seeing. I'm a big fan of everything we can do there. I already talked about this a little bit. I call it unbundling college, right? If students come to us and they say, "Well, I already took this at the other university," our default is to say, "Yeah, but we just teach it different. You need to take it from us." If I'm right, I think there's going to be increasing numbers of students who say, "I already have 10 credits from my community college, 15 from WGU. I have a couple from over here." And we're going to start to be in the business of how do I evaluate all of these credits to make sure that they're fair and even encourage them to do this so that they are not wasting their time. They are learning real and meaningful things and getting through the program quickly. I think, is that all? Oh, this is so good. Okay. I have to show you this really quick. Let's see if I can not click on it. There we go. This is my last thought. The resume is dead, long to the resume. This is Linköping University in Sweden. It's great being at BYU-Idaho because one of my students served a mission in Sweden. She showed me this. And they are wearing overalls. And every student gets a pair of overalls at the beginning of their time at Linköping. And all the way throughout, this is my blog, don't sign up, have a life instead. Every time they pass a class, do an internship, visit a country, get a letter of recommendation, they get a patch and it goes on their overalls. And throughout the university, they start with only one or two, their name and not much else. And then their overalls become this really cool patch of badges that they wear everywhere they go. They look super goofy, but they're all really proud of it. Okay? Kind of like graduation robes. But instead of a robe, it's a quilt. It's a quilt that we put together based on what's going to be most meaningful to employers and leadership and all of those other things. Thank you for listening to me rant. That was super fun. I think we have time for one or two very brief questions, then I got to let you go for lunch. Anybody have one? Was it useful? Was it interesting? Did it make you think things you hadn't thought before? Okay, you can clap. Thank you, friends. I'll stick around for a minute, but don't take too long because you got to get to lunch. Good times?
Super good.
Well, to be fair, you were in the last one before I see the fruit.
See you later, my friends. I hope that was useful. Oh, Wesley, I forgot. I'm so sorry. Wesley is going to say a prayer.